one to talk with, all by myself. No one to walk with, but I'm happy on the shelf. Ain't misbehaving, saving my love for you, for you.
Hello, and welcome to episode 2 of Roz's Random Ramblings. I am Roz, and I realized that I forgot to explain last episode why I suddenly decided to do a podcast now. And honestly, it's because people have been bugging me to do a blog or a vlog or whatever for the past 15 years, so better late than never, right? Right? Am I too old for this crap? As for the title, Roz's Random Ramblings, though I will generally take a linguistic angle to what I discuss, the randomness is the topic, and the ramblings, well, that will become obvious if it hasn't already. People have asked me about various things related to linguistics, so I like to do the research and give them some background. And occasionally their questions have nothing to do with linguistics, and I answer those as best I can too. I figure, well, someone asked the question in the first place, so someone else will probably be interested. And here we go. This episode is titled, Why Does Everyone Have Lawns? Which is quite a bit different from the first episode, but I don't want to focus exclusively on function words. Or even mainly. Just sometimes, occasionally. Only linguists find function words interesting enough to study for hours on end. Also, it isn't entirely true that everyone has lawns. Like, I don't own a house, so I don't have a lawn, though my building does. I kind of have to have access to a lawn as I also have a cat who, though not fussy, does have requirements, and chasing other animals across a lawn before eating grass and barfing on the floor is one of them. People ask me why I don't like rugs. Cat owners get it. Some people have gone for alternatives to lawns, and the last place we lived in had decorative gravel instead of a lawn, which I liked because I didn't have to mow it. I'm all for low maintenance as much as possible, but it was a little hard on my cat's tender tootsies. She kept trying to find alternate routes through the yard that didn't require walking on the rocks. Anyway, exceptions aside, it's a fair point. Most yards these days do have lawns. In fact, I started thinking about it because I heard someone mowing their lawn the other day, even though we just had snow like a week before, and it's snowing again today. But it's springtime in southern Alberta, snow one day, sun tanning the next. Literally. 3 days ago, it was plus 27 Celsius, and I was sitting on the lawn with my cat. I think some people might mow because they're trying to will winter to end. Like dudes out there muttering, if I mow my lawn, winter will finally stay away. Back to the main topic. Let's start with where the word lawn comes from, which is Old French. Don't worry, we'll get to everyone's favorite Old English soon enough. The original Old French word is actually launde, L-A-U-N-D-E, which sounds remarkably like English land because, surprise, surprise, both words come from Proto-Indo-European, where it was probably pronounced lend. Lend split as people moved across the continent and became land in Old English and launde in Old French. What happened to get them to two words that you probably thought were completely different, but are now realizing are suspiciously similar? Lawn and land? Was it magic? Actually, yes, it was. The magic of class struggle. Did I get you on that one? Don't worry, not everything is about class, I promise. If you listened to my first episode, you may recall that a major event happened in 1066, which was that the French-speaking Normans of the northern France area called Normandy, I'm really trying to emphasize the north thing here, I hope that's coming through. The Normans conquered England. Specifically, a guy named William the Bastard led the Norman army to conquer England and become its new king and gain himself a cool new title, William the Conqueror. Guy had to conquer an entire country to improve his marketing. And when he conquered the country, he killed or deposed most of the British nobility and replaced it with his French friends and family. Crazy aside here. I'm also into genealogy because it's another interesting area of research, and discovered that my brother-in-law has one line on his family tree that is related to British monarchy, and his ancestors fought alongside William the Conqueror and were, in fact, some of those noblemen who replaced the English nobility. Man, you think you know a guy. Should I worry? I don't think I have anything worth conquering. I mean, I don't even have a lawn. Anyway, as I mentioned in the first episode, this event had major consequences for the English language in that everything big, by which I mean business, law, politics, all of these were suddenly conducted in Old French instead of Old English, which meant that the remaining English people, most of whom were peasants, suddenly had to learn at least some French if they were going to survive. And this led to a split in the English language, beginning the form we call Middle English. Okay, this next bit is going to initially seem like a random tangent, but I promise you it's not. Have you ever wondered why we call the living animals cows and cattle, but the meat we eat is called beef? And we raise pigs but eat pork? Sheep turn into mutton on the table, and deer become venison on our plates. Why is that? Well, prepare to be shocked. The words for the living animals come from Old English, while the words for the food come from Old French. I really have to be careful not to overuse that. This is where class comes in. The living animals were all raised by peasants who spoke English, while most of the time the meat, especially the expensive kind, was eaten by the French nobility for whom the animals were raised. Thus, the English speakers were the ones interacting with the live animals and using their native English to talk about them, whereas the French speakers mostly had dealings with the animals after they died and used their native language to talk about the food stage. And this difference has been codified in our language to the point where most of us don't even realize that every meal is a class struggle. Ugh, this beef is so bougie. Apart from teaching you something new about food, I use this example because the same basic thing happened with land and lawn. Land, from Old English, was and still is a very versatile word with a broad range of meanings. We can own a patch of land, talk about land as soil, use it to refer to a country or region or even a group of people, and a bunch of other things that I'm probably not coming up with at the moment. And that's just the noun. The verb can mean land a plane, land a job, land a fish, and many others. My point here is that the Old English word land has a general meaning that is reflective of the wide use that it inherited from Old English. Lawn, on the other hand, is rather specific today and is generally understood to be the area of grass surrounding a house. I don't think there's a verb form of lawn, although an AI tried to convince me that "we're going to lawn this field" is a legitimate sentence. Who even says something that pretentious? Have you ever heard that? Maybe I'm just hanging in the wrong circles? Anyway, as you may have guessed by now, the French, who were rich, had not only huge tracts of land, but also very large houses. My brother-in-law's ancestors, for example, owned several castles, la-di-da, around which they planted lawns. And these lawns were very specific areas that did not grow anything particularly productive, but were intended simply to look nice. Because even today, wasting space shows how rich you are. Compare this to land, which was what people used to grow less attractive but practical things like grain and vegetables. And what's more, only the rich people owned lawns, while the poor people had to rent land in order to make a living. That's the feudal system for you. I'm coming across as such a socialist right now. I swear, I'm not calling for the abolishment of lawns. I love rolling around on a nicely manicured lawn, trying to do a somersault and putting my back out. Ooh. I just don't like taking care of lawns. I think lawns are fine. And in a few moments, I will explain the process by which lawns became democratized, so you don't have to feel guilty about liking them too. But first, there was one more element related to yards that was also subject to this rich-poor split, and that is yards and gardens. Has it ever occurred to you before that, actually, yard and garden sound pretty similar? I'm guessing not. Why would you think about that? But like land and lawn, yard and garden both came from the same Proto-Indo-European word, which was probably gordos or gare and meant an enclosed area. The evolution of the words yard and garden was a little more complicated, though, as that PIE word became gaard in English, G-E-A-R-D. The G eventually became a Y, which happened a lot in English. And yard had an extremely broad meaning in Old English, as it basically referred to any size property that had some kind of a border, whether a little blip of space behind the house or the entire nation. Like land, almost anything became a yard. It's only in modern English that yard has come to have a narrower meaning. I wonder if this ever got confusing when the leader of the country was talking. Like, what does he mean when he says we're fighting to protect our yard? Then again, they didn't have TV or the internet, so it's not like many people would have heard about what the king said until the army was already marching through. Brings new meaning to stay out of my yard. Anyway, my point is that, although the word garden didn't really come into common usage in English until the Normans conquered the country, the English peasants already had a word that meant basically the same thing. Except that, like lawns, gardens were things rich people had. And like land and lawn, this is kind of how we differentiate a yard from a garden. The former is slightly more general, while the latter is a bit fancier. So in modern English, you can say, I'm going to grow a garden and a lawn on the land in my yard, and there's nothing particularly confusing about that sentence except that I can't think of a situation where you would legitimately say something like that. But I promised I would talk about the democratization of lawns and why none of us need feel guilty about having them in our yards with gardens. I mean, they are water intensive, but that's a different problem. Mind you, water may not have been as big an issue back then, since the original lawns were not primarily grass as they are today. There were several practical reasons for this, the main one being a lack of lawnmowers other than peasants with a scythe. And if you ever see anyone with a scythe cutting a lawn, run, because it's probably death. And also impractical, because you have to wait until the grass is fairly long before you can cut it, and you'll never get it all the same length. My dad would sometimes cut weeds with an old scythe before weed whackers came out, which is how I know this. Plus, they didn't have sprinklers back then, just more peasants walking around with watering cans. Thus, in order to have a nice green lawn, you wanted plants that would remain generally green and generally short with generally little maintenance. Early lawns did have some grass, but often they had a wide range of plants that stayed fairly short and had the additional benefit of smelling nice. These included clover, creeping thyme, moss, creeping jenny, oregano, and chamomile, among others. And since these lawns were a little easier to keep up, all it took was some sheep or other grazing animals occasionally wandering through to keep the length down, and peasants to mind the animals and occasionally swing a scythe as needed. The resulting idyllic vista thus produced became the foundation for the style known as pastoralism and became rather trendy among wealthy people. A particularly notorious example was in the court of Louis XVI of France. Marie Antoinette and her friends would go out to the country and play shepherdess, herding sweet little lambs around the yard in the grass with their fashionable shepherd's hooks. And we all know how that worked out. For once, it wasn't the lamb that was led to the slaughter. Was that tasteless? Oh well. My point with all of this is that having a well-manicured lawn required a lot of work, and only the very wealthy had the money to hire the people and animals required to achieve that pastoral look. Then, in 1830, a man named Edwin Beard Budding invented the first push lawnmower, which, at a glance, actually looks similar to, but slightly more complicated than, push mowers today. Like the ones with the spinny blades and no motor. You push them? I used one for a while when I had to take care of a lawn because I was kind of afraid of a gas lawnmower exploding for some reason, but I finally broke down and got the gas one. Much better. Fun fact: before gas-powered lawnmowers, steam-powered lawnmowers were briefly available, though these never caught on because they were really huge and cumbersome. Seriously, they had massive metal tanks of water and at least some of them required pushing by hand, which, if you're going to have a steam engine, at least make it a ride-on mower. Imagine pushing this water-filled cast iron tank around your lawn. The noise must have been insane. If you think modern lawnmowers are bad, imagine a train in your neighbor's yard at 6 a.m.
Shut that off!
Anyway, the important point is that lawnmowers led to several changes in lawns. One was that they could be all grass instead of planting a variety of plants, though honestly, I like the idea of all the textures and shades of the different plants. But having grass meant that different varieties of grass were cultivated. And then the grass lawns also became less expensive to grow. And people could keep their lawns cut much more easily themselves without having to hire anyone or buy grazing animals. This is a simplistic explanation. There were other factors, but it's the basics of the process by which lawns became available to the people. They were no longer just for the rich, but could be grown by the masses, though lawns still maintain a certain status, even today. Hard to lose 1,000 years of history. And so, the answer to why does everyone have lawns? Well, it's because they were once a status symbol that was codified in the language, and they still remain one, but in a different way. They show the prosperity of our culture and society as a whole, and how any one of us is worthy of the same things nobility once held exclusively. I still don't want to mow one, though. It's the middle of April here in southern Alberta, and we're still dreaming of spring. As I mentioned, it's snowing today, but thankfully it quickly melts at this time of year. Since I'm in a spring mood, though, I've decided to make the next episode about the color green. Specifically, I'm going to try and answer the question, how can green simultaneously mean something good and something bad? Will the answer surprise you? Probably not, but hopefully it will be interesting anyway. This has been Roz's Random Ramblings. All research and production are done by me, Roz Hirsch, because I wouldn't want to torture anyone else. The following are musical works that I used in this episode, including copyright information. The first was Fats Waller singing Ain't Misbehavin', which is off copyright. The remaining songs I acquired through a subscription to the website epidemicsound.com. These include the following: Sandman by Mike Franklin, which I played for several transitions. A Quirky Creature by Guto Lucena, which was playing while I talked about the unfortunate steam mower. Fields by Franz Gordon, which is playing now and also played while Marie Antoinette played with lambs. Riverwalk by Philip Ayers, which played while I talked about my brother-in-law's genealogy, yards, and apologized for sounding like a socialist. I promise I'm not. And The Box in the Attic by Martin Landstrom, which played when I claimed language change is magic. It's not. A special thank you to Steven Spicer for yelling, "Shut that off!" and no doubt confusing his condo neighbors. Fortunately, most of them are seniors and probably didn't hear him. And also to my good friend and linguist in the wild, Kim Becker, who has been giving me lots of helpful advice. Kim also has a podcast called Women Talkin' About AI, which offers an often critical view of AI technology and its application. I release new episodes every Monday at noon, Mountain Time. Our province just switched to permanent daylight savings time, so yay for us. And as always, thanks for listening.